As we close out the conference, we want to recognize two groups of individuals who are, I believe, just great examples for us in terms of their lives as image bearers. And we don't want to necessarily hold anyone up on a pedestal, but we do want to imitate people as they imitate Christ. The two individuals, or the two groups of individuals we want to recognize, is first Nadine Templer for her lifelong effort. First of all, being a women's ministry leader for in India for a number of years, and then also with Hope Worldwide, as you guys saw on the video. And the second group of individuals, so to speak, is a Naomi ministry that's done some great work in Guatemala, and we'll share about that briefly. Nadine is with family, so she won't be able to join us today, but we were able to obviously see her video. I'll go ahead and share a few things about her life. Again, the point is not to, as I said, put anyone on a pedestal, but to find what we can imitate in their lives to honor God and be what He has called us to. So I'll just go ahead and share a few things about her life, some takeaways that can help us. So as noted in the video, Nadine grew up in a family where her father provided just great examples of how to care for others. I think she had mentioned that her father wasn't even a person of faith, but he did still look out for and mentioned, hey, if someone's in need, take care of them, look out for those who are being hurt, these kinds of things. And that made a huge imprint in her life. Additionally, during her time, as I mentioned, she was a women's ministry leader. One of the things that she did is she went through and bathed herself with the Gospels. So she regularly read through, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it's even more extensive than that. But she was regularly bathed in the Gospel. That's another lesson we learned about her life. The second thing about her is she found ways to stay connected to reality. She's very aware of different neighborhoods and how we can very easily put up walls and not want to see the pain of others. So what she did is she made it a point to live in, some majority worlds, as we would say, India, different parts of South America, Africa. She also, obviously, as we know, did Hope Youth Corps to really help those who are having challenges and are underprivileged throughout the world. That's one way that she kept in touch, again, with reality. And the third way that I learned from what she shared is that she read a lot, and she's continued that practice even to this day. The book that was referenced was The Hole in Our Gospel. That's a great book to read for those of us that would like to better understand, number one, the gospel and how we can help others. So what are some takeaways? The first is that we need to imitate Nadine and strive to be shaped by the gospel, okay? That means reading it, meditating on it. In some cases, maybe it's teaching it, depending on our role within the church. So that's the first thing. The second is to find ways to serve those in need. Now, we don't have to go to a different country or a different continent to do this. We can find simple ways that are heartfelt to serve our communities. So that's something we can do. That's something we can imitate. And the last is continue to have a curious mind to read and learn, have that soft heart that Nadine shared about that I think was very evident to each one of us. So today we just want to recognize Nadine for her heart, for her efforts, and see what we can take away from her life to really be great disciples where we live. So that's the first person. Right now, we're going to go ahead and bring up Chris Coles and Mark Felcher with the Naomi Ministry. And these guys, you may not have heard about them. They're two Santa Claus individuals, as I will say, just incredible hearts. I'll link both videos, the video that you guys saw about Nadine's life and then also the example of Chris Coles and Mark Felcher. And I also want to add Manuel, who is in Guatemala, who's, quote, the boots on the ground, who does an incredible job of taking care of the individuals that are in need in Guatemala. So some of the things that I want to share, for those of you that may not know, Mark actually started this effort, and I wouldn't say it was a ministry at the time. I think the story is $40. He was down in Guatemala and he was helping an individual, and it was as simple as that. And I think over time there was additional needs that came up, and Chris got involved, I believe, in 2014, and he really got more of the word out to additional individuals, got more funding sources. Over time, they've had 60 people, probably more by now, that have come through from the United States to Guatemala to help those in need. They are called Gringos by their beloved friends in Guatemala. This is not a hope project. This is not an organization, so to speak. It is organized, but this is just the heart of a few individuals who want to give their heart to help those in need. Some of the things they've also done is serve as a father. I know Mark has served as a father, and probably in some cases grandfathers to some individuals. But I think specifically that was one of the girls who turned 15, and Mark was able to serve as a father to her at her graduation, matriculation, so to speak. And I'll share the video, just an emotional video, just that happened with that love that was there expressed. And then they also worked on a mechanics school for some of the gentlemen in the community so they could learn some trades and so forth, and also a sewing group for the women. The tagline is from Job 29:13, making the heart of the widow sing, from the book of Job. And so right now I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Chris Coles and Mark Felcher to share a little bit about how the ministry came about. I've outlined it a little bit already, but if you guys can share more about like why you started it, how it's going, what inspires you to keep going, that kind of a thing. So I'll hand it over to you guys.
We should probably ask, how long do we have?
So we are wrapping up at 4:20. So I would say you have about 15 minutes, and then we'll close it out.
Take it away.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start, since I'm kind of the first one that got there from us. But I originally heard some things about Guatemala going back to 1980. Pancho Hobbs was working with Dr. Richard Reinbold in Guatemala, and that planted a seed. My wife and I tried many times to serve the poor in one way or another. And, you know, if we had a family around the corner that didn't have a Thanksgiving turkey, we'd buy them a turkey and things like that. But we weren't satisfied with that. We tried to get connected with third world situations, and things just petered out. Nothing happened. We did adopt a boy from India when he was 9.5. He still lives in the area here. We've had many people stay in our homes. So this is something we've been cultivating for a long time. In 2005, one of the members of the church here went to Guatemala on behalf of American Airlines and found a Hope School that was started in a squatter community in Guatemala City. It was a disaster of a building. It was really just a shack, and the kids are having a hard time. 220 kids are enrolled in this school each year. So she came back to the U.S., found me knowing I was a contractor, and asked me to go down there and work on the school. And I was like, of course, God's been preparing me for this for 25 years at the time. So I went down there the first year and worked on the school, worked on the roof. I remember standing on that roof and looking around and thinking, I can't fix this. It's just what I can see from here is overwhelming, but I'll do my part. And I got the roof done. The next year we went back and I can't remember, we rewired it. The whole school was running on one 5-amp circuit. But we did different things for 5 years. And then the school got a couple of phone calls from gang leaders saying if they didn't get $10,000, they were going to kill Mary Ellen, the principal. That was the last day they had school at that building. They moved into an apartment. I did some carpentry work there so they could finish out the school year, but the government stepped in and said, you can't do this anymore. That was the end of my working there as kind of doing projects. I saw the poor, I saw their homes, but I didn't really get to know them. And so, Otomo, what you're referring to is 5 years into my time there when I met Rosita. Somebody had given me $40 and I wanted to go there and do something I could go back and tell that person what I had done. And that's when we met Rosita. We took groceries to her house. She had 3 kids in the school at the time. 4th one had already graduated from 6th grade. And I'll let the video tell that story. It was extremely emotional. It cut me in ways I didn't know I could be cut. Seeing the grief that she was going through, the desperation. Her husband had just died, and she's trying to support these kids by going to the trash dump and collecting plastic bottles to recycle for $8 a week or $10 a week. It was less than 23 cents per person per day in her family. And then there was an avalanche that destroyed half her house. A few months later, I went down and repaired the house. And we've been very, very connected ever since. Thought about her every day for the last 12 years. But that was just the beginning. And I began to realize that going there and working on a project is good. It does help some people, but I'm missing the relationship aspect of this. And so God orchestrated a number of other events, and I wound up being down there for about a month and invited other Americans to come down just a couple at a time. And we would go visit the poor in their homes and find out their situations. And Chris was one of those a few years later. And boy, Chris got a baptism of fire there. We went to repair Carlos's house. It really needed to be rebuilt. Carlos was a brother in the church there. He had a stroke and he just couldn't keep up the work. He had his daughter and 4 grandkids living in the house. So Chris and his wife came down. We got a plan together. We got the materials, delivered the materials. We started demolish. We moved the family to an apartment nearby, started disassembling the house, and Carlos had a heart attack. And he died later that evening. And that's a whole nother story about the third world medicine there. So that was Chris and Ruth's. Chris had been there the year before, but that's really when they got to see deeply. We went to 2 funerals that week. Manuel's mother had also died that week, and both of them were people we had met. Both of them gave me a very firm handshake as if to say, I'm about to leave this world. Please take care of my friend Manuel, or take care of my kids, in the case of Carlos. Since then, we've expanded to many other people. During COVID, we were regularly feeding about 150 people. We have about a dozen kids in school who otherwise would not be able to go to school. And that's a long-term solution in a lot of these situations for them to be able to earn an income. Chris has adopted the family of Carlos and some others as well. But that's how it got started. Right now, we have a group of probably about 30 that are regularly involved. Many of the people that have gone with me, it's up to about 80 or 90 now. Many have stayed involved with sponsoring kids to go to school or meeting medical needs or things like that. And there's a group of about 30 emails, which in some cases is couples or families, that I will regularly send out updates, and they often will pick a particular need and take care of that need. But the most important thing is the relationships, staying involved, taking the poor on a trip to a place they'd never been in their own country, like taking Rosita to the beach. She'd never been to the beach. It's 2 hours from where she lives now. She grew up 20 minutes from it and was never able to go there. Taking the poor to a park or to a movie for the first time, or even some of them just out of the city. For Claudia, we took her to get a prosthesis for her foot, and she was 44 years old and found out it was the first time she'd ever been outside of Guatemala City. We took her about an hour away to Antigua, Guatemala. So there's just so much more when you get involved. I appreciate the mission trips. They serve a purpose, but they really lack the ongoing relationships that we've been able to enjoy. Jesus said, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. And he also talked about giving to the poor. We've combined the two. So we have friends, and it seems kind of strange to be recognized for this. I look forward to a day when this is so common. So many people in the church are doing these kinds of things that nobody would stand out for what we're doing. But let me strongly encourage you, if you possibly can, get in relationships with the poor. Don't just write a check. Don't just take care of an individual need. Get to know them. That means more to them than any donation or contribution you could give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen. That was, the scripture from Job 29, I made the heart of the widow sing. They didn't teach us how to do that at conferences, make the heart of a widow sing. It's something we've learned. And we also found out that when you make the heart of a widow sing, there will be tears, theirs and ours, and everybody that comes to get involved personally, especially if it's the first time out of the U.S. at a country like this, but first time they can get involved going house to house, going in the neighborhoods, it can be overwhelming. And then to form those personal bonds. Hey, can you just send me a picture of your family? That's all I want. Whoa, we're looking at this, we're in this shack. It obviously leaks during the rainy season, much less anything else coming and going through the cracks. And we say, there's so much we could do here as Americans. Oh, we want to fix, we want to help out, we want to build, and we want to, help you. But like Mark said, there's so much about connection that just motivates them like no other, as well as motivates the volunteers. I guess that's what we call ourselves, advocates. I guess is probably better. See through the Bible how God turned people from volunteers to advocates for his people. It's a very strong connection all through the Bible. And so that's what we do. And anytime we can help anyone, probably just to reiterate that, Mark, I think, and I agree that we could not do what we do now without Manuel Sazo.
Absolutely. Yeah. He is our translator, guide, protector. He's been in the U.S. and he's seen the destruction of wealth in his own family. And so he's not tempted by it, but he's very eager to use the wealth that we're able to supply to meet the needs of people that come to our attention. So yeah, he's an invaluable part to this partnership.
The ironic thing is, Mark and I are sitting in a rehab room because I broke my femur and I'm going through rehab here. Manuel is helping this afternoon. One of the husband-wife team that are in their 70s,
Their 80s, something like that.
80s, and she was waiting for the public hospital for a titanium kneecap replacement, which just happened recently, and her house is on the edge of.
It's treacherous.
Edge of town, and every room is connected by treacherous concrete stairs. And she has to get to the top floor to cook because that's her main income, her cooking. She was a cook in the military. So Manuel's over there helping her in her rehab to move around and figure out, put up handrails so she can get up and down the stairs without taking another tumble. So we're going to have an interesting reunion next year when we go down to see her. We're going to share pictures of our x-rays.
Thank you. No, that is so inspiring. What would be maybe 2 or 3 takeaways for disciples that they can say, you know what? Yes, we don't want to necessarily, as I said, hold people on pedestals, but what are some lessons that as we want to imitate you as you imitate Christ, what are some things people can do in their neighborhood? Similar to what I share about Nadine. You know, she's going to different continents and doing amazing things. We can't necessarily do that, but we can care about people in our individual communities. I think, Mark, you mentioned actually getting to know people. So if there's any, 2 or 3 things that you could recommend people do, because a lot of us are still, thinking about some of the challenges the difficulties we've seen over the last few years, but some of us are still kind of like lethargic, like, what does that mean to me actually doing something? So what are some things you could recommend?
All throughout the scriptures, the scriptures list widows, fatherless, disabled, and aliens or sojourner, stranger in your land. And if we can focus on any one of those in our neighborhoods, communities, because those are the people most at risk, the people most in need. Just getting to know some of their basic needs and just helping them out. People have asked us, well, that's great that you're doing it in Guatemala, but what if there's poor here out there in your own town? It's interesting because no sooner had I returned from Guatemala in my first trip in 2014, I got a phone call. Hey, we got a phone call, and we have a single mom whose husband is in jail, and I think they might live near you. So, oh, okay. So why are you calling me? Because her husband was from Guatemala. Oh, and we know that you just went there. Oh, so what kind of situation? Jail? What kind of, I don't know anything about prison ministry. How am I getting pulled into this? Well, what's their phone number? Okay. They live 2 minutes from our house. How could we not go help them out? A 4-month-old and a 4-year-old. We've been like family ever since 2014.
Mm-hmm. So that's one way. What are your thoughts, Mark? What would be a second way?
So, I want to highlight something Chris said there about the scriptures. One of the scriptures that has meant a lot to me is that religion that God considers pure and faultless is this: to look after widows and orphans in their distress. And that doesn't mean just a one-time thing. Looking after means getting involved, staying involved, taking care of things as they come up. So it really is all about relationships again. In our neighborhoods, there are some pockets of poverty. There are certainly people in need. Somebody has a fire, somebody has an accident, things like that. But I will say this, that the poverty in a place like Guatemala is very different from the poverty in the US. One of the guys that came with me a few years ago, he works for I'll call it a charity that specializes in the poor in Appalachia. And then he went with me to Guatemala. So I asked him to compare and contrast the 2 types of poverty. And he said they're quite different. There's a safety net here in the US for pretty much anybody. You can get your surgery, you can get your medication, you can get an education, the government will pay for it. You go to a third world situation like Guatemala, and Guatemala is really a second world country with third world elements within it. Many of them can never, ever get out. There is no safety net for them. Just a couple of days ago, I got a message that one widow and her daughter that we're involved with, they've had no food in the house for 2 days. And so we had to quickly, take care of that. Manuel, as soon as he found out, he took care of that. There's just it's a very different situation. And so if somebody wants to get involved in their neighborhood, look for opportunities and pray about it, and God will provide them. And when you take care of a small thing, God will give you a bigger one. I'm living proof of that, and so is Chris. If you want to get involved where the distinction is greater. Guatemala sounds exotic, sounds like it's a long ways away, but my brother lives in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And it's the same distance for me to go visit my brother as it is to go to Guatemala City. So going to LA is much further than going to Guatemala City. If you look on a map, it's really not that far away, but it does take some courage. I would highly recommend, though, get a good contact before you endeavor to go somewhere like that, because you can get in a lot of trouble. Guatemala is a particularly dangerous place. I think I counted 13 people that I have known, either them or close family members, who've been murdered in the time that I've been involved there. So you don't want to get involved in those situations. So far, we've done pretty well, but we're still willing to take the risk because we know that God has called us there.
Right.
Very clear. So yeah, just do what you can. If you've been trustworthy with a little, God will give you more. Certainly, if anybody's interested in Guatemala, they can contact us. And we also have contacts throughout Central America as a result of our contacts in Guatemala. So we'd be glad to assist getting someone involved.
Yeah, no, I love what you guys are doing. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who had never heard about you guys that are on listening to the conference right now. But I just think that your hearts are just hearts that we want to, imitate, as you guys also are imitating and following Christ. So thank you for everything that you've done, for your example. I do want to, like I said, we want to recognize you and Nadine just for your efforts. Definitely, obviously, remain humble. Keep doing what you're doing. I don't think this is going to affect that in any way. But again, thank you for your efforts. Right now, we are going to close, but I don't know if Damon Brogue had anything he would like to share as a treat for those of us who have stuck around to the end here about his conversion. I love his conversion. This is kind of like the aftershots, the conference is done. Yeah. But I love your conversion. And if you can share about that, would be great.
Yeah. Who doesn't love a good conversion story? They're all great.
Oh, yeah.
They're all amazing. Mine just happens to be less usual. I was straight out of high school, enlisted in the U.S. Army. And that just happened to be the period of history where the United States got involved in the first Gulf War. So I found myself at age 19 in the desert in northern Saudi Arabia, southern Iraq. And there was a casualty in our unit, a sergeant who had died. He worked in the same type of job that I did. And his crew was attacked. And he passed away, and there were some other casualties. But that got my 19-year-old mind thinking about my mortality. Mm-hmm. And I tried to grab hold of a Bible that I had sort of superstitiously brought along with me. It was a King James version. And I hadn't attempted to read it at all in the few months we were there. It was just kind of under the seat of my Humvee.
Protection by osmosis.
Hoping it was going to protect me somehow. This is how much I knew about spiritual things. So when this sergeant in our unit passed away, Sergeant Hawes, I pulled the Bible out from underneath my seat with the question in my mind. I just want to know, like, if I died, what would happen to me? So I opened the book to the book of Genesis in chapter 1, and by about the 5th chapter, the Shakespearean English overwhelmed me. I closed the book because I didn't know what the word begat meant, and there was a lot of begatting in Genesis chapter 5. And so I just closed the book and spoke toward the heavens and said, God, I just want to know if I died, would I be all right? Are we all right? And the following day, after my team chief and I drove out to our fighting position, which is we were protecting an asset that was in the desert. We drove 10 miles or so further into the desert. So we're not near a town, let alone near a road of any kind. We're just in the sand in this Muslim country. And it was on that day that this dusty, object started going across the horizon line, and it stopped going across and turned toward us and started coming at us. And we didn't know if it was friend or foe. It is a combat zone, so we fixed our gaze upon it, and then actually our weapons upon it. And once we could see that it was just a lone vehicle, the vehicle stopped probably about 50 to 75 meters away from us. And one individual got out of the vehicle, put his hands in the air, and had something in his hand as he walked toward us. And he walked all the way up to our Humvee and handed me a copy of the Good News version of the Holy Bible. And if you don't know what a Good News version is, it is an elementary school level reading. It calls Noah's Ark Noah's boat, just so you don't get confused. And all he said was, "Here you go." And he turned around and he walked away. And I got back in his vehicle and drove off. And for whatever reason, I started this time in the book of Matthew. And surely by the time I got to about end of Matthew chapter 7, end of the Beatitudes, I had the answer to my question. I knew that I wasn't on the narrow road, that I probably wasn't in a right relationship with God. And from that point, I began to ask anyone who was religiously affiliated in any way, how do you get saved? How do you get saved? And I heard a lot of different answers from a lot of different people. I tried to check each box and do all those things. 2 months later, I was back in the States. And in the first couple of months that I was here, I got reached out to by 4 different members of the Milwaukee Church of Christ in different places around town. One at work, 2 at school, one at a family function. She was the friend of a family member. And I came out to a worship service of the Milwaukee Church of Christ. And as soon as I walked in, I could see there was a great difference. What I had read, I had kept reading that Good News Bible all throughout the rest of the New Testament. And I knew I should be looking for a church, but it wouldn't be the kind of church that I grew up in. And anyway, when I walked in and saw the Milwaukee Church of Christ, I said, this one looks like the one in the Bible. And when they asked me if I wanted to study, I said yes. And we began studying discipleship that day after worship service and studied every day that week. And I got baptized that Friday night. That was in October of 1991.
Yeah, like I said, ain't nobody gonna tell me nothing. That was an angel.
I wouldn't believe this story, except it happened to me, so I don't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's either an angel or like just someone like obedient. Like,
Yeah,
I don't even know. But the thing is, they were obedient if it was a disciple or whatever. But also, you were also obedient, and you were curious, and you just went after it. So it's just a beautiful story.
praise God.
Amen. Well, thanks so much again for taking time to join the conference. I'm so glad that everyone was able to hear your story about the angel that approached you in the desert. I pray that each one of us can now reflect on Easter and perhaps think about communion a little bit differently. We can think about Tov and how we can be great stewards of the power. Really, it's the power, right, that God has given us for good or for ill. Let's use it for good, and let's build other people up and show them love, show them concern. Let's consider those who have done great things, such as Mark Felcher and Chris Coles and Nadine Templer, and not necessarily hold them on a pedestal, but what can we take from their lives that we can apply to ours? If it's just getting to know orphans and widows in our neighborhood and taking care of those in the hospital, whatever it might be, let's do that. And at the same time, let's make sure that we are bathed in the scriptures. This is something that Chris didn't mention, but he is also a prolific reader. He writes a lot too. We got to be in our word. We got to be bathed. We got to see Jesus regularly. And again, reflect on him through the day and through the year. So love you guys. We will be having another conference soon. We'll let you know when it's coming out. Have a good one. Shalom.